Hi everyone, UristMcSparks with you again, and we're going to continue on a Roblox U lesson on Roblox racing. So in the past few weeks, we've been working on making a really cool racetrack. We've got a nice car, got a nice track with some jumps, good turns. We're really getting a really long way towards making a game. Now the last final component is going to be scripting. Scripting is basically any kind of custom behavior you want your game to do. Because until now, we've been basically sticking more or less with the Roblox game, which is, you can do a lot with it. We made cars, we made tracks. That can only go so far. Essentially, I would describe what we've made as a sandbox. There's not really much of a game to it at the moment. There's no winners, there's no losers, there's no score, there's no cycle. You're just kind of working with the pieces that are there. It's like just kind of a playground. So to make this a game, we need to learn how to script. Now, scripting is a really big concept, and there's a lot to learn. It can seem a little intimidating at first, but we're going to start off really simply. This lesson is not going to assume you know anything about scripting whatsoever. If you already know some scripting, please stick around. There may be some things in here that you haven't learned before. Goodness knows I've been scripting doing some kind of code for over 10 years now. And even now, I'm still learning little tips and tricks. So it's always good to, keep an open mind and, try to learn as much as you can. Because you can make some really amazing things once you've grasped the fundamentals of scripting. And I would say the initial push of scripting, the initial learning curve, is probably the hardest. Once you get over that, you'd be amazed at how easily it'll be to make games, learn new languages, and do incredible stuff. So let's talk about scripting. What is it? There's sometimes a little bit of mysticism to it. It's just kind of this magic words that you say and suddenly something happens. Well, to put it simply, scripting, or really coding in general, tells a computer program what to do in a specific order. That's pretty much all there is to it. Now, the only catch is that computers, while they can do all kinds of crazy math stuff, computers are actually not really that smart, to be perfectly honest. They have to be told exactly, specifically what to do in a very specific way. That's where a coding language comes into play. The language is all the instructions that a computer knows how to, what they mean. I can't just say game turn on or game start or game over. You can't just talk to a game. You have to say things to it in a way that it understands. So in this case, we're using Roblox, and the scripting that Roblox uses is a language called Lua. And it's a pretty nice, lightweight language, and let's learn how we can use it to make our game interesting. So there's a lot of things I want to script with this game, but I want to start off really nice and simply. One thing I would like to add to our game is a starting light. The red, yellow, green that you have at the beginning of races, to let people know when the race is going to start. It seems like a pretty simple task, and I think we can handle this. We can learn how to script this. So we're going to start off with the light itself. I've already made that. You're free to make your own if you like. But I'm going to go to Insert. I'm going to search for Roblox Racing Start Light. And here it is. Hope you like it. I'm not that great a modeler, but I think it'll serve our purposes. I'm going to move it right over to this racetrack. And as you notice, I've made a really, really simple track. There's not much to it. I expect your tracks to be much more complex than this. But for the sake of testing things out, sometimes you want to have a really simple environment to work with. I'm just going to use the Move tool to boost this light up. And I'm going to make sure that it's anchored. Something I regret not going over in last week's lesson was the importance of anchoring things in your track. Anchor basically means, hey part, you're not allowed to move. Even if a car hits you, even if there's gravity, you need to stay put. In general, if things aren't supposed to move in your games, like a building or a road or racetrack, make sure that when you select the part or the model, that the anchor tool is highlighted. That means it's stuck in place. Things you don't want anchored are things like cars or players. You do want those to move. So just a little side note there. but very important in Roblox. So I have this model, and inside this model, sorry about that, inside this model, I've actually got some lights in here. This isn't just a flat object, it's actually got some lights that can light up. Let's take a look at that. Now to do that, I'm going to open a new panel. Well, first I'm going to open the properties, something we should be very familiar with by now. I'm also going to open this one called the Explorer. The Explorer is actually really important to know your way around when you're scripting. This is very important because when we want to do things to our game, specifically if we want to do things to parts in our game, we have to know where they are. We have to instruct the game where it is to know what it needs to work on. So you'll notice that if I click on my light here, inside this thing called the workspace, Start Light gets highlighted. Now you can think of the Explorer as basically a really big file directory for your game. Everything that's normally in your game that's going to be part of your level is in this area called the workspace. There are some other folders too that do very specific things. For the most part though, we're going to be working with the workspace, and I'll let you know if we switch. But for now, know that most things that need to be in your game will by default be in here. So we have our workspace, and we have the Start Light. Notice how there are these little arrows next to a lot of these things. If there's an arrow, it means you can click on it. You can actually see what is nested inside. Again, I remember I told you this is like a file structure. Notice how I actually have 3 models inside of my Start Light. I have a green, a red, and a yellow light. And those are all models in themselves. They just happen to be inside Start Light. So if you're thinking that's like a file folder on your computer, green, red, and yellow models are all in the folder Start Light, which in itself is in the folder Workspace. Again, note I would like to point out these aren't actual folders, but the analogy I think is sound. So I can even open these up further, and notice there's even stuff inside here. I've got a shell, and then a part called light bulb. And inside light bulb, I have something called point light. Now, when you're making models yourself, you don't necessarily have to go through this much organization, but I find this helps me sort things together. I like having things really strictly organized so that I can find things easier and it's easy to code with. Now, point lights are really neat. They're a part of our lighting system, and you can use it to make lights in your game. So right now the light is off, but notice down here in the properties, once I have the light selected, there is a field called Enabled. If I click on that, the light illuminates. Pretty neat. And if I click it again, light turns off. Pretty cool. And I've got that for these other lights as well. So notice for the yellow light, I also have a point light set a light bulb. Click on that. Hey, that turns on too. And I've color coded the light, the color of the light with the color of the bulb. So that goes to the green, yellow, red. But let's say we want, so we know that we can turn these lights on and off. So, we click this enabled toggle, they turn it on and off. But if our game is running, we don't have access to all this stuff. We can't just click something in our game and suddenly magically the light will turn on. Something needs to tell it to do that while the game is running. And the thing that we're going to use to do that is a script. So out of script, I'm going to go to this place called Server Script Service. I'm going to right click on it, go down to Insert Object, and just click on Script. As a side note, you can also right click on Workspace, Insert Object, and click on Script. You can put a script in the workspace. That works fine too. But again, as you heard earlier, I like organization. This place called Server Script Service, again, you can think of this like a folder. This is a place where I like to put a lot of my scripts. When you put a script inside Server Script Service, the script will run, execute its code as soon as the game starts. So you don't have to worry about it. They don't have to think about where it is, and it'll just start automatically. It already has some text in the script. I'm going to delete that for now. And let's get started. So when you're scripting, it's good to have a fair idea of what you want to accomplish. And in this case, I want each of these lights to turn on in sequence. First, I want the red light to turn on, then I want the yellow light to turn on. Well, actually, let me be more specific. Again, computers have to know. I want the red light to turn on. Then, as the red light turns off, I want the yellow light to turn on. As the yellow light turns off, I want the green light to turn on. So basically, we've got a couple things we want this game to do. So let's start with the red light. How do we tell the game that we want the light to turn on? Well, first we have to tell the game what light we're talking about. So when I want to reference this specific light here, this point light is inside this red model, we have to go through our file structure of the workspace. Now to do that, I'm going to start off this name called game. Game, just anytime you need to refer to something inside your game, whether it's in workspace, server script service, you always have to start off with this word game. Then I'm going to say game.workspace. Notice how Studio is already suggesting that workspace is something that it could use. And whenever you see a dot, that just kind of means you're going down a level. It could also mean other things, but we'll get to that in a moment. So I need to go all the way down to this point light. So I've already gotten to game.workspace. Now I'm going to do .startLight. Because notice, that's the name of this. That's the name of our whole model. That's inside the workspace. And then I want to use the red model inside the start light. Inside that, I want to reference the light bulb. And then I want the point light. Now that we have this whole long list of models and then ending in the light, what do we do with it? Well, what's really neat about scripting is that anything that's in these properties, or to say pretty much anything in these properties, you can toggle on and off with the script. So let's look at this enabled. We can actually say, now we've got this point light, I'm going to say .enabled equals true. And all this does is says, okay, the enabled property of this point light, we want this to be true, which means we want it to be on. In terms of the game, if we have this clicked, see a little check mark? That means enabled is true. If it's unclicked, that means it's false. It can't be anything else. It's either on or it's off. And so there we go. Let's actually test this out. I'm going to click on the Home tab. And I'm going to click on Play Solo. Again, testing out our game. And I'm going to walk over to our light. And hey, it's on. It's illuminated. So let's reset, stop testing. Okay, so as I said, I wanted the red light to turn on, then turn that off and turn the yellow light on. So all we have to do to turn off the red light, so I'm going to copy this whole line, copy it. Now on the next line, I'm going to say false. So again, the computer is going to read all these instructions one line at a time, and it's going to execute them one line at a time. So it starts off with this first line, looks into the game, the workspace, start light, so on until we get to the point light, and we say that it is enabled. Then it's going to say that it's disabled, or enabled is false. So let's take a look. Hit play solo, enter the game, and look at the light, but it's off. Why can that be? We told it to turn on and then turn off. Well, I'm going to reset. The thing about computers is that they are really, really fast. It's going to try to run these lines of code as fast as it can, and that takes a fraction of a second. So if we actually wanted to see the light turn on and then turn off, we're going to have to tell it to pause. We're going to have to tell it to wait. Say, hold on, script, it's okay, you don't have to do this super fast. We want you to take a breath. We want to be able to see something that happens, so take a breather. So in between these two lines, I'm actually going to give a little bit of space. side note about programming, you can have as much space as you want if you need extra lines to help you see it clearly. I'm going to add something called wait 1. Now this is what's called a function. This is a special command I'm telling the game to do, something that's built into Roblox. And all this line means is tells the game to pause for 1 second. Or specifically, when you're in this script, pause for 1 second before you get to the next line. If I wanted to make it 2 seconds, I'll just replace 1 with 2. Or I can make it 5 seconds. Or pretty much any number I want. In this case, it doesn't have to be too long, so I'm just going to wait 1. In fact, since I have to walk over there with my character, I'm going to add another wait, maybe more like, let's say 5 seconds. Give me time to actually get over to the light and see it. So I'm going to click play solo. Remember, we're waiting a couple of seconds. Oh, there it turns on and off again. Exactly as we told our script to do. And click the reset button now to stop testing. Now let's continue with our script. So before we're turning on the red light and then turn it off, as I said, the next thing we want to do is turn on the yellow light. So very similarly, we're going to do workspace.startLight, .yellow model in this case, .lightBulb, .pointLight, and I'm going to use enabled equals true. And we're going to wait 1 second. Copy this. And say after 1 second, that's going to be false. Now I don't know about you, but these really long lines of a whole bunch of names separated with dots is really starting to confuse me, and this is getting kind of hard to read. So let's say I leave, come back to this code, I want to figure out what it's doing. There's so much stuff going on here, I find it kind of confusing. Now there's a way we can shorten this whole long line of stuff, and that's by using something that's called a variable. This is a really important thing to know in programming. Now a variable is just a placeholder. It's kind of a little storage device, so you don't have to type out a long thing every time. Or if you want to save a value, you want to do something to it. It's just a way of quickly referencing something really quickly. So at the very beginning of our script, I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to start off by using this keyword local. Whenever you make a variable, it's a very good idea to prefix it with this word. I'm going to call this red light. And here, the variable, basically, whenever I want to change this light bulb, I don't want to type out this whole thing every time. I just want to say, hey light bulb, turn on, turn off. What we can do with a variable is if we say red light equals game.workspace.startLight .redModel.lightBulb.pointLight, and leave it at that, we can use this name right here, red light, and whenever we say that, the code will know that we actually mean this really long thing on the right. So if I go ahead and delete this whole line that we wrote earlier, just replace it with red light dot enabled equals true, and the line below that, say red light dot enabled is false. When the code gets to this line, you'll go, okay, the guy's telling me I want to set the enabled property of red light to true. And the code will say, well, what's red light? It's going to look up and go, oh, hey, red light, you said what that is earlier. Red light is actually this thing right here. It's actually the thing in game, workspace, start light, red model, light bulb, point light. Okay, well, I know that I can turn on and off properties of that. And we can do the same thing for the yellow light. And I'm just going to copy and paste this here. So it's very similar to how we did the red light. And now we can actually shorten our code here. And I think that's much easier to read, don't you? You're just seeing red light, yellow light, instead of these long things, which is super hard to parse. Really hard for a person to read. If we test it out, play solo, I'm going to run over to our light here, take a look at it. Okay, it turns on red, turns on yellow. And, well, I thought we told it to turn off. We said enable to false. That's odd. This is something that's going to come up so many times in your coding. It's never possible to code something perfectly from the start. It's just simply not possible. You're going to get errors and bugs. And that's normal. So how do we figure out what's going on? Well, a really good place to start is in the View tab, this panel called the Output panel. And this basically gives us a text readout of stuff that's happening in our game. Things that are kind of happening behind the scenes, and specifically in scripts. And notice here, there's a red line here. It says server script service dot script 15 attempt to index global yellow light, a nil value. Now what a nil value means is it means it's trying to do something to an object that doesn't exist. And have you saw what I did wrong yet? What happened is it looks like I actually misspelled yellow light. Notice how when I made the variable for it, I spelled yellow correctly. I spelled it with 2 L's. And yeah, that's the right way you spell it. But down here, I spelled it with 1 L. This is a very important part of programming. Whenever you make some kind of variable or you're referencing something in the workspace, you have to use the name exactly as you see it. If it has capital letters versus lowercase letters, if it's misspelled, if you don't spell it exactly the same way, the code won't work. Something bad will happen and the code will stop running. So now we fix this. I'm going to reset. Oh yes, I made changes. I would certainly like to keep them now that I fixed it. I'm going to click play solo to see if that fixed the problem. Running, 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 jumping, 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 red, yellow, off. And see, no new errors show up. It's taking up a little bit of room, so I'm going to shrink that down. Excellent. So with that in mind, I'm just going to make our last light here. Call it green light. Oh, no Adobe, you will never be updated. Never. Equals game.workspace space dot start light dot green model dot light bulb dot point light. Whew, I'm tired of just writing all that out. That's why we're using the variable, so we don't have to type that out every time. And a really great way to make sure that you're not misspelling things is to use copy and paste. That way you're guaranteed to be spelling it correctly. So green light dot enabled gets true. And for now, I don't want to turn off the green light. I'm just going to let that stay on while the race is going, because you know the green light can stay on for a little while longer. Give people a chance to start racing. And one more time, just going to play solo. Make sure that it's running correctly. Trotting over here. Goes red, yellow, green. And there we go. And that's basically all scripting is. We're going to do a lot more complicated stuff later. But in essence, that's all we're really doing. We're telling the game to do pretty simple stuff. And it'll get more complicated as we want to do more specific and more interesting things. But this is the basic of all scripting. And these are things that you can use in any game, really. Notice how, we use this in a racing game in a stoplight. But you can use this in any other kind of game. If your game is a role-playing game and there's a house and you want to turn on a light, turn it off. The same exact principles apply. If you want to change any other property, the same principles will apply. We'll explore this further in a bit, but for now, this has been UristMcSparks. Thanks for watching. Remember, you make the game.